I'd like to welcome Mark from Cockpit to Cockpit up here. He's many of you have read his book. It is an amazing 30,000, 40,000 foot view of the process and everything I wish I knew back day one of pilot training, so that I didn't have to do it the year before I was trying to leave active duty. So I'm going to let Mark take the floor. And again, if anyone didn't get any food or anything like that, just identify yourself, and we'll send one of our staff to go help you.
Thank you, Mike. Matt. I was just talking to Mike. Oh, good afternoon. Welcome back. Feel free to keep eating and working lunch kind of environment. This is going to be a casual discussion and a learning environment. So I understand we have a varied audience in terms of timeline. Some people are many years away from being ready to make that transition out of the military over to the airlines. Some of you are already in it. Some of you have already let go with one hand of the military and you're out there in the wilderness, so this will have particular applicability to you. To our two civilians in the room, I don't want you to feel like this doesn't apply to you just because my book was written for a military audience. I think everyone understands that the airline hiring process, applications and interviews and getting hired is exactly the same for a civilian pilot as it is for a military pilot. So hopefully you'll find some value here as well. Tough audience, after lunch, after Southwest. So that's a tough act to follow. Please bear with me and try to stay with me, and I promise you I'll make this of some value to you. It is Veterans Day, after all. My wife and I both come from military background, military family. We appreciate your sacrifice. We appreciate all that you do to protect our freedoms. So we just want to add another thank you on top of that for what you guys do day in and day out. All right, because I am a former fighter pilot, this should come as no surprise to anybody that I would like to talk about me for a little bit. So this is a brief synopsis of my transition process. You can see me right up there, the little guy walking out into the great unknown. 20 years in the Air Force, F-16 IP evaluator, worked my way up to 12th Air Force Stanabel, 3,500 hours total time when I got out. Retired as a lieutenant colonel. I think most people would look at that and say that's a pretty successful military career. So 3 months after I retired, I found myself teaching private pilot at the local airport as a CFI, something I'd never done before in my life. And 3 months after that, I was flying doctors around in a Beechcraft Bonanza, working 16 to 18-hour days, flying through some of the worst weather you can imagine in a single-engine general aviation airplane. Kind of asking myself, how in the world did I get here? That is not a logical career transition, right? I think most people would agree with that statement. So what happened? Well, I'm going to give you the short version. One day driving to work, I had to pull over on the side of the road. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was having chest pain and getting nauseous, and pulled over on the side of the road, and just turns out it was just stress. It was just stress of career transition, trying to wonder how I was going to take care of my family. And that moment was kind of a pinnacle moment in my life, and it became this book because over the course of the next year from that moment, I had 4 job fairs, 3 major airline interviews, and a wealth of experience that I did not have the day I walked out of active duty. And that experience taught me so much, and I learned so much that I didn't know going into my transition, and I couldn't believe I didn't know it. I couldn't believe that I thought I was pretty well prepared, and I really just didn't know what I didn't know. And I put that all into this book for you, for everyone in this room, so that nobody ever has to deal with that stress that I dealt with in transition. Because there's the hard way, and then there's the cockpit to cockpit way. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about today. I like to start with just a current intel brief, go through some of the major airlines and what we know about what's going on at those airlines right now. I get most of this information directly from the airline briefs that they give at OBAP, at Women in Aviation, some of the big job fairs, and some of their online virtual pilot career fairs. So most of what I'm going to tell you is directly from them. After that, we're going to talk about what is of interest to most of you, and that is, how do I get my application notice? How do I stand out and get that interview? From there, we'll talk a little bit about networking, because that's one of the ways that's going to help you out. We'll talk about job fairs and pilot career expos and how not to blow it, really. I mean, you have this golden opportunity when you get to meet with an airline recruiter. So do your homework and be prepared, and we'll talk about how to do that. After that, I'll talk a little bit about what's in the book and offer you the special discounts I know many of you have already taken advantage of, but I really do believe in this organization of TPN, and the prices that I'm offering today are the best prices I've offered throughout the year, because this is a special organization, and Matt was part of launching the Pilot Network. I'm going to sidebar here just for a moment and tell you a little funny anecdote about how the Pilot Network and Cockpit2Cockpit came together. So I had written the draft of this book, and I thought I had a pretty good product, but I wanted to hand it to a buddy and let him look it over, just to make sure that I didn't miss anything, or just to get some feedback. And he handed it back to me, and he said, it's a really great product, and I think it's going to do well, but you have a chapter on networking, and you don't talk about the Pilot Network. And I looked at him and I said, the Pilot who? What are you talking about? I'd never heard of it, and I couldn't believe I'd never heard of it once I looked into it and found out what it was. This is a tremendous resource. So moving on. My goal here is to go faster and funnier through this and get to questions at the end. I want to get us back on timeline, and I also want to hear from you and find out what's on your mind and get any questions. So current intel briefing, Delta. I feel bad for Milta ATP. They were supposed to have this time slot, and they had to leave. But one thing I want to impart to you is Milta ATP, how many people did not get a chance to talk to them? Okay, a couple in the room. Hopefully you already have your ATP. If not, they are a really good option, because they bundle a lot of the services that you're going to hear from today. They bundle the actual flight portion of getting your ATP license. They bundle the simulator portion that is now required, 10 hours in a level D simulator, and they do that down at Delta. And they also bundle my book and interview prep with interview prep with Emerald Coast, and also application and resume review with Checked and Set. All of that under one price. But the point I want to highlight here is the CTP portion of that process that's done in the Delta simulators, which means you get to spend a week down at Delta interacting with their instructors and their training staff. And Milta ATP clients have been very successful at getting Delta interviews because of that. So something to think about. The quick way to get your application notice at Delta is to know somebody, a pilot there, and have them send an email to the HR department and give you a little push. And if they do that, that HR department will pull your application and they will score it, with the caveat that they will only do that once every 12 months. So if you think you're not competitive yet, I wouldn't ask for that to be done. I'd wait until you are competitive and then ask them to do that so you can get an interview that way. They're a little behind in their pool right now. Wait about 3 to 6 months from the time that you get the job offer to the time you start. United also has a similar system. So they do what they call a chief pilot meet and greet. Again, if you know a pilot at United, they can bring you along with them in to meet their chief pilot. That's pretty cool. Those chief pilots have 2 recommendations a month that they can directly give to give an interview invite. So that's a really easy way to skip the line there if you know somebody. So this whole networking thing, it really does work. All right, interesting point there about United. Very different than Southwest philosophy. So United will give you points for having a 737 type rating, but only if you have time in that type rating, if you actually have gone out and flown the aircraft. Whereas Southwest, and I've heard Rocky say this, appreciates the type rating, but they actually are not keen on you having a lot of hours in a 737 because they want to train you the Southwest way. I'm not saying don't go get the type rating. I'm just saying be aware of that. No PIC requirement there at United, and we just heard from Mike and Jessica, no PIC requirement at Southwest right now either, so that's a great deal. And then United's not going to look at your resume until the day of the interview. So if you're going to put emphasis on application or resume at United, put it on your application. All right, American. Their recency requirements are a little higher than most. They're asking for 300 hours in the last 12 months, desired, not required, but desired. But caveat that with the fact that they very, very, very highly value military experience. And they will actually prioritize that in their algorithm higher than your recency. So most of the people in this room are pretty in good shape in that respect. You can see the competitive times there. That's what they've said, you know, their average hire has. But the one thing I want to highlight out of that is look how many letters of recommendation the average new hire has there. And internal recommendations there are highly valued. So beat the bushes, find your American friends, and get them to write you some letters. That'll help. The other thing I want to highlight is a personal experience that I know from fact. The organizational fit assessment, who has not filled out an American Airlines application? Okay, so there's this portion of their application called an organizational fit assessment. It's a personality screening test, and it's part of the online application. You take it, and then it locks you out after you take it. You don't know really how you scored on it. I have heard people that totally bombed it might get a thanks but no thanks email. But if you don't get the thanks but no thanks email, you just don't know if you did well or not. But if you're not getting any calls from American, that might be the reason, because your organizational fit assessment score was not good. If they like the rest of your application, 6 months from the date you submitted your first application, that portion of pilot credentials will open back up. It'll be locked for 6 months, and then all of a sudden you'll go in there one day and it'll be unlocked again. So there is second chance. That's just kind of a neat tidbit that not a lot of people know. UPS. UPS is highly, highly dependent on having internal recommendations. 2 is the minimum. So if you don't know 2 people, and by the way, their recommendation process is a bear. I mean, somebody has to sit down, the person who's recommending for you has to sit down and fill out a form that probably takes an hour to fill out. It's a very in-depth recommendation. So, and you need 2 of those pretty much to get interest from UPS. They do still value meeting you at career fairs. So where most airlines have gone to this internal pilot expo thing at their headquarters, UPS will still go to an OBAP and a WAI and sit down and talk to you and go over your resume, and they put value on that. JetBlue, you can see the competitive hours, all that stuff. I probably should have put in red that second major bullet there. They're really heavy on, is this person involved in processes or organizations that are bigger than themselves? They want to see that you are a very dynamic pilot who does more than just fly airplanes. What else have you done for your organization or your charitable work to be part of a process that is bigger than yourself? All right, and they have a pretty short upgrade time as well. JetBlue does, 3 to 4 years. That's pretty good. I think some legacies can compete with that depending on the base and the airframe. Okay, that's the quick intel brief. How do we get noticed by these airlines? There are thousands of applications on file. How do I help mine stand out? Did everyone get a copy of this talking paper? I was giving them out last night. They're also out on the table, the little round table that's just outside the back door there. So this has some pretty good, just top-level overview, things you can do to try to improve your score, try to get noticed. The book is a much more in-depth, much more detailed version of that that talks about everything from your military career all the way through to post-interview. So just to let you know that. The point of this slide, logical career progression. The hiring managers in these hiring departments have seen thousands and thousands and thousands of pilot resumes and applications. They know what a normal career progression looks like, both on the military side and on the civilian side. If your career doesn't kind of track in that logical progression, it's probably not going to compete as well. So try to do everything in your power to help it meet that criteria. You can see on the top of that first arrow there, that's a typical fighter career progression. You're going to start out as a wingman. You're going to upgrade to a flight lead. You're going to upgrade to instructor pilot, eventually maybe evaluator pilot. You're going to do some kind of higher headquarters staff work, safety, and hopefully some kind of command or supervisor position. On the bottom side of that line, other communities, cargo, refueler, special ops, kind of the same progression. You're going to start out in the right seat, then you're going to move to the left seat, then you're going to become an aircraft commander, an instructor pilot, do some kind of staff work, and then again, higher headquarters work or supervisor work. So that's the way your resume should read, and you want to make that real easy for whoever's reviewing that resume to see. You want to put those titles right down the left side in bold so that that stuff stands out. They want to see that you're, again, more than just a pilot. What else do you do? Have you gone above and beyond? That sounds crazy, right? Because we're military pilots, we always go above and beyond. We do so much every day. But you have to do more than your peers is basically what it boils down to. You're competing with thousands of other pilots. So ways you can do that, and some of this is military and it sort of blends with civilian. So if you feel like your military career maybe did not do what you wanted it to do, there are ways you can enhance it by then doing some things out on the civilian aviation side to make up for it. So being an academic or sim-IP, if you're flying now in a civilian job, think about volunteering for these positions or upgrading to them as soon as you can. Becoming a check airman, assistant chief pilot, these things are the leadership that the airlines are looking for. On the flying side, on the bottom of that arrow, we talked a little bit just a little while ago with Southwest about getting some extra ratings, using that military equivalency to check some extra boxes, CFI, MEI. By the way, CFI has a really cool program called, is it Gold Star? Is that what it is? Anyone know? I might have the title wrong, but it's a level of qualification of CFI that if you're actively teaching CFI, you could achieve that rare level. It's kind of like being an Eagle Scout of CFI, and that would look really good on a resume. The FAA Wings program. This is kind of an easy one at the earlier levels. FAA Wings program is just, it has basic, advanced, and master. You go onto the FAA.gov website and you look this up. It's just a proficiency program for general aviation flying, so civilian flying. And you do this by attending seminars or doing online courses. So, you know, if you could put an advanced or a master FAA wings, that's going to look really good, like you're actively a professional pilot who's advancing their career. And then we've talked already today about the type rating. It helps, but it's expensive. So, you know, that's a personal decision whether you can afford it. The GI Bill is a great way to pay for that if you haven't used up your GI Bill already. All right, moving on. Why would I put down my clicker? All right. Networking. So the pilot job fair scene, I think most of you know, has changed quite a bit in the last few years. It used to be these big organization of black aviation, aerospace professionals, Women in Aviation International, National Gay Pilots Association. Those used to be the way to meet with a major airline pilot recruiter. They have all moved kind of away from that. Most airlines have now moved on to this airline hiring expo that Southwest was just talking about, where they do it in-house. Good and a bad thing. I mean, the good thing is that many, many, many interviews come out of those pilot hiring expos. The bad thing is they're really hard to get a chance to attend. Exceptions to that, United and UPS. United and UPS, at least from OBAP this previous year, we're still meeting with pilot candidates at OBAP, taking resumes, sitting down for about a 5-minute face-to-face. If you do get a chance to, well, let me highlight one other thing here. Mike talked to you about the Pilot Hiring Expo and how they do a separate requisition, so the chances of getting an interview out of that are really high, but that is not the only way to get an interview. So don't despair if you're not one of the lucky 400 that gets to attend that you'll never get hired until the next Pilot Hiring Expo. Not true. And Mike, can you add how many outside of the Pilot Hiring Expo get interviews per year? Do you know?
I can't really, but once we sort of exhaust that list, then we'll go to the bigger requisition of other applications we have applied.
Right. So it's still possible and not even, I don't know, I would venture to say it's close to, well, we're going to lower our hiring numbers next year, but I'd say last year it was close to half of our hires maybe come out of the Pilot Expo, or what do you think?
I probably wouldn't go out on that limb.
Okay.
But
Maybe not quite that much.
we do see, though, that when we interview from people from the expos, our take rate, our hire rate is much higher. It's like 70%.
Yeah.
Whereas typically we hire about 62% of the people we interview.
Cool. All right. On the next several slides, I'm going to talk about how to do your homework before you go to one of these events to meet with a pilot recruiter. So hold that thought for a second. I'm going to move on to informal networking opportunities. Quick story. When I was going through my transition, I had kind of done the shotgun approach and put out applications with several major airlines. And one of those was American Airlines. And I had a good friend in Dallas who worked there. He's been there about 15 years. And he said, hey, we're having a company picnic next week, and I can invite some friends. So he invited me and 5 or 6 others to go to the American Airlines company picnic. He said, bring your resumes. So we brought our resumes, and he introduced us to their chief of pilot hiring, who asked if we were interested in getting hired at American. We all shook our heads yes. And he took our resumes, and 4 out of the 6 of us got an interview invite out of that opportunity. So informal networking opportunities, they do still work. Okay, what is this? This is the bottom of the Delta Airlines website. It's all that little legalese gobbledygook that you usually ignore on a website and don't even know exists. It's way at the bottom, and nobody goes down to the bottom of a website. But there's some important things on here that are going to help you prepare for a pilot fair or a career hiring expo or any chance to meet with a recruiter. So I'll start up here in the upper left, this About Us link. About Us has a tremendous wealth of information about that airline that you can research so that you can talk intelligently with the recruiter about what's going on at that airline, what their values are, what their history is, and I'm going to show you that here on another slide. The next link down from that, Careers. Careers is specific to the job you're applying for. So you're applying to be a pilot. You click on Careers, there'll be a place to search jobs. You search pilot, and it's going to tell you exactly what their requirements are. And in some airlines, it will also tell you what the job description is and the values that they espouse for that job. So that's a good place to find those core values that they are looking for in an interview intent. Next one, News Hub. Anything that that airline has done that has been in the news will probably be found on that link. Other websites might call it something different. You might see it called Media Kit or Press Kit. Same thing. Moving on. Okay, so when you click on About Us, this is what comes up. So, few important things on this page. History. You should have a general idea of the history of the airline that you're going to meet with. I'm not saying you need to memorize the entire, everything that happened year by year, but a lot of culture comes out of an airline's history. So if you understand their history, you're going to understand their culture. A more in-depth version of doing this would be to read a book on that airline, like Nuts or Leading the Southwest Way. I'm just giving Southwest examples. There are books on every airline out there. If you have more time, you might decide to pick up a read. Facts and stats. So all that information that Mike was talking about you might want to know where our domiciles are, you might want to know what kind of aircraft we fly. If you don't know that at 737 at Southwest, you're in a lot of trouble. Anyway, Facts and Stats has all that good info, the fleet size, the type of aircraft, where they're domiciled, where they fly. So that's a good one to dig up some info on. awards and recognition. That gives you a good idea of what the company has been awarded lately, what they value, what they strive for. So that's also a good talking points when you're having a conversation with them about, wow, I really would love to work for a company that's been recognized as one of the most valuable places to work, listed as one of the top 100 best employers in the country. Okay.
Honey, I have to say it, investor relations calls.
Okay. Investor relations.
The investor, real simple.
Okay.
You guys, if you just trade stocks, you all know every quarter they come out with an investor relations call. Every single word in there is measured. You can download audio while you're jogging, just listening, and that way you will know the current business issues that are affecting that airline. Because remember, their business is your business.
That's probably going to be in the media kit or in the news hubs, but if you search around, you'll probably be able to find that pretty easily. Thank you. All right, so the book, as I said, today I've just whizzed through this in the interest of time, in the interest of it's after lunch and where half of us are falling asleep. But there's so much more information in the book, and many of you have read it and can tell anyone else that it's very pilot-oriented, very process-oriented. You have a checklist at the end of every chapter. It's just good. All right. The pilot shortage myth. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to point out that sub-bullet up there at the top, the subheader. The formula for success at Cockpit to Cockpit. Knowledge plus preparation equals success. The book is the knowledge. I'm going to talk in a second about the support pack. That's what I call the preparation, and equal success. If you go into an interview with the knowledge and well prepared, you're going to do well. So we talked about the pilot shortage. Yes, at the regional level, that is true. At the major airline level, there's still thousands of qualified applicants on file. So you are going to have to go above and beyond to prove yourself to a major airline. I've heard a lot of pilots say, well, I'll just do an interview preparation class and then I'll be good. I'm not poo-pooing interview preparation classes, and they hit that in Southwest enough. But what I am saying is getting the interview is the hardest part. The interview is not the hardest part. It's getting the interview that's the hardest part. And so I put all this information out there for you, again, so that you guys don't have to have that stressful transition like I had. There's all the topics that the book covers. Yes, shameless sales pitch. Many of you got this last night informally over drinks. Here's the support package. These are the kind of things that I've put in there. You're going to end up doing most of this on your own. I'm just offering you examples and saving you some time so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to caveat what I put in the book. It's written in the book very clearly, but I want to make it clear here. These are examples. These are not to be taken verbatim and just putting your name in place of what's in there. It's got to be your own original material. I'm just giving you format and kind of examples of what to put in there. All right. Down at the bottom, you'll notice there's a new item in the support pack that I'm just unveiling today. This is the first rollout of the personalized transition checklist. So I've told you that there's a end of chapter checklist at the end of every chapter in the book. These are action items that you need to accomplish to be ready for your airline interview or to get an airline interview. So with the personalized transition checklist, it's a spreadsheet that takes all those end of chapter checklist items, and then up here at the top, you can plug in your availability date, and it's going to put a recommended due date for having that item accomplished. When you do it, it'll show up in green. If it's unaccomplished, it'll show up in yellow. If it's past due, it'll show up in red. You can tailor this to your own liking. If you think that something should be done 18 months out instead of 12 months out, you can go in there and change the months out to whatever you like, but it's just a neat product personalized to your timeline. Offering that for just $5. All right. There's the rest of the stuff that's being offered, the support pack, the book, or both of them together is the best value pack. The prices, I think, are pretty reasonable. Again, this is not about making $1 million. This is about helping you guys. That's where my heart is. That's why I wrote the book. And it does my heart good when I hear so many people come up to me at an event like this and say, thank you for doing this. This was so needed. Because I know, because I went through and didn't have it and wished I did. So there we have it. All right. I got through that whole thing, hopefully in relatively short order. What questions do you have? I see. Yeah, so if you want this and you already bought the support pack, then you can buy this here at the conference for just $5 added on. What other questions? Anything about transition? Anything about anything? All right. Well, thank you for your time. Again, appreciate your service. Happy Veterans Day. And thank you, Matt, for putting together such an, Matt and Adam and the team at TPN for putting together such an awesome conference.